I guess we can start.
Yeah, I
I thought since we're reading the play that a seminar style would be more appropriate to reading and analyzing the play. And the play is in two parts, and I thought one part would be today and the second part next time, but the second part is much shorter and the first part is long. So we probably will stop somewhere in the middle and do the rest next week. Besides, there are kind of preliminary things to say before we really look at the play. I'm not sure.
Could we introduce ourselves?
Oh, sure thing.
We know everybody except.
Should I start? I'm Kostas.
I'm Richard Newman.
I'm Jody Johnson. I'm on the priority list, first time here.
Penny Chase.
Nancy Hears.
Jeannie Belovitz.
Ken Abbott.
Gail Morse. Linda Cuffler.
Linda Cuffler. Okay.
Tim Johnson.
Bob Harwood.
Ann Hill.
Nancy Johnson.
No, he doesn't.
I'm not here.
That's not Don Griffin.
Oh, who's up? Linda.
Linda.
You are?
Yeah.
Linda Myrsiades. Sue DeVere. I'm Julie. Carol Hollowell.
John Mulvihill.
Okay. So I noticed that you're holding the Odyssey, so I should explain what we're really discussing, although how it pertains to the Odyssey is this play, which, as I said, is in two parts, which is based on the Odyssey. This play is based only one third of the Odyssey, from books 13 to 21. Actually, it stops at the end of book 21 of Homer. So it takes up only about 37% of the Odyssey. And it is interesting and probably important to see what Homer leaves out and why he leaves it out and what he includes. So as we're going through, I'm going to talk about that, because you can understand the play a lot better if you see what he's trying to do. So let me just start and say just a few preliminary things. Eventually, from this play, Linda and I wrote a script. The play is about 150 pages. The script that will eventually be put on stage as a reading vehicle is only 40 pages. And it only has 7 characters from the, I don't remember how many I counted, let me see. The actual play has a lot more. I think it's something like 26 if you count all the people that are involved, although some don't have much to say. So we cut it down to 7 characters. So the script, which you'll see eventually when we get there, is much shorter. But this is the entire play that Kazantzakis wrote and is now here translated in English.
By Kostas.
Yeah, by me. It's in two, as I said, in two parts, and the emphasis on the play, if you're reading it, you'll see that the first part, the emphasis is on Aphrodite, which is not the case in Homer. The second part, the emphasis is on the goddess Athena. And that's very crucial, because what is being shown is that Ithaca, this is the return of Odysseus. I guess I have to backtrack a bit. The return of Odysseus after 20-year absence, fighting 10 years in the Trojan War and 10 years trying to get home. So after 20 years he comes to Ithaca, and he finds that the place is in chaos and he has to put it back in order. And to do that, he has to deal with 109 suitors that have been after his wife for the past 3 years, not the past 20 years. They just decided in the past 3 years that Odysseus has been absent long enough, which means he's probably dead and he will not return, And so they're trying now to take over the kingdom. The only way they can do that is to marry the queen and get rid of the young son, who is already about 20 years old and should be the heir to the kingdom. So they're in Homer, they're trying to do both of those things. They're after Penelope, and they want to get rid of Telemachus. Twice the age of any of the suitors, because we're told throughout that they were playmates of her son Telemachus, who is about 20 now. So it's obvious that they're just interested in taking over the kingdom. In the past 3 years, in Homer, she's been trying to put the suitors off by weaving a shroud for her father-in-law, who is old and is no longer active in politics, and is at death's door. So she wants to do the right thing, but she's also doing it in order to put off the suitors from bothering her, till some maid discovers what she's doing, weaving in the day, unweaving in the evening, and then starting over again. They tell on her, and now, when the Odyssey opens, Homer's Odyssey, the suitors are after her to make up her mind. And in order to prevent a battle between the 109 suitors, they have decided to let her make a choice. And they all agree that whomever she selects, they'll abide by, they'll allow it. But she must select somebody. So in Homer, she's a very faithful wife. She's been waiting 20 years. Just before Odysseus left for Troy, he said, once our son sprouts a beard, you are free to remarry, because by that time you'll know I won't return. Well, Telemachus is now an adult, and so she's willing to make the choice. In Homer, she doesn't really want any of the suitors. There is one kind suitor who does not appear in the play that she favors. And she hopes that if she has to have anybody, perhaps he will be the one. Kazantzakis doesn't deal with him at all. Instead, he makes Eurynomus the second in command among the suitors as the one that she desires. But in Homer, he's a very sinister person who tells her that he'll make sure that the son is safe, not to worry, and he's the one that behind the scenes is trying to get him killed. So those things change somewhat. The return in the Odyssey begins with Odysseus coming back as a beggar to Ithaca and coming and meeting a shepherd who is actually the goddess Athena in disguise. And he lies to her, gives her a long story about who he is, because he wants to preserve his wealth that he has brought along with him. And in Greek culture at the time, a person's worth is what he attains in battle, how good he is. It's called aristia, or excellence. And you'll notice that if you've read the Iliad and the Odyssey, or the Odyssey, that the emphasis is always on aristia, which means the excellence of the warrior. And the excellence of the warrior is measured by the feats, the deeds he accomplishes in battle. And in order for people to know the worth of those deeds, is measured by the wealth he's given. So there are three terms that are very important in the Homeric epics. It's aristia, which means excellent. It's the word kleos, K-L-E-O-S, which means honor. And the word geras, G-E-R-A-S, which means material wealth. And they all go together. Once greatness, Aristia, is shown by his deeds, which in turn are shown by the amount of wealth he has received. That's why throughout the epic, there's exchange of gifts, always. And you measure one's worth by how good or not so worthy are the deeds. So Odysseus loses everything in his 10 years coming home. He comes home naked, and he's almost at the point of dying till he's rescued by a young girl called Nausicaa and taken to her father, who is the king of the area, and they give him hospitality, another key word in the Homeric epics. Hospitality is important because the only way Greece could become an economic power was to be able to move from one place to the other, since it's surrounded by sea on all three sides, and they had to be able to do it without being afraid of being killed, not received. So hospitality became a major gift, a major idea under Zeus. Zeus was called Zeus Xenios, which means Zeus of hospitality. And even today, the hotels are still called Xenia, which means hospitality. So hospitality was important. You could go anywhere, knock on any door, and the law said that you had to be received without ever asking who the person knocking on your door is. They could be a thief, they could be a murderer. You don't ask questions. But the guest had also to abide by the law, and the guest could not harm anyone while he was in someone's home. So hospitality was very big. Remember, there are no hotels yet, there are no motels. So the only way they could travel, and they had to travel by ship, by rowboats, and they had to stop in the evening. They couldn't sail at night, so they had to stop at various places. So that became very important. That's why the whole myth in the Iliad and the Odyssey is the abduction of Helen of Troy. If someone can abduct someone so high up on the political scale like Helen, what happens to everyone below that? So they had to find a way of punishing whoever did this, because you're breaking the laws of hospitality at Zeus. That's pretty much what happens with Homer. He's concerned with those things. Kazantzakis is not. He brings the story up to the present time and is more interested in what does it mean to be a warrior, or what is Aristia, and he reinterprets this in various ways. I think I mentioned last time that his word for Aristia becomes Andria, which means manliness. And in English, they always refer to it as the Cretan glance in books, in scholarly books. That the idea of excellence is the kind of man one is, not the deeds that he performs in battle, but what he is as a person, how he behaves. And that's pretty much what you have here. So the two-part play called Odysseus, the play is called Odysseus, not the Odyssey, because Kazantzakis also wrote a work after this play called The Odyssey, where he continues the story of Homer from where Homer leaves off. Here, he takes books 13 to 21 and reinterprets it so that the first part, in order to show chaos for Kazantzakis, becomes Aphrodite, which is sensuality, which is goddess of the senses, who is the goddess of love. So what he's saying, that reason has disappeared while Odysseus is gone, Athena is reason, she's the goddess of wisdom, and Aphrodite has taken over. Sensuality, the senses, the needs of the body, and that's what you see in the first part. And we're told that the flame on the altar of Athena, which was always lit while Odysseus was home, has gone out. And at the very end of the play, you'll notice that the flame miraculously starts up again. So reason is taking over. So the second part, Athena enters the scene. Reason enters the scene. And Odysseus is reason. Although during his trips, he allowed himself to fall into sensuality. That Circe, Calypso, all the affairs he had along the way, and he liked it, but he's also now is telling us that that's not the way, and he's trying to fight against sensuality. And that's what he says in the first part when he first comes in as a beggar and they ask him, who are you? What are you doing? He makes up stories which relate to his adventures, but they're disguised to show that he once too was a man that sought sensuality, but he has learned differently, and he's trying to rise to a different level. And Kazantzakis' philosophy is that a man or a human being has to endure, to put up with everything that fate dishes out for one, fight against the body and its demands, to kind of reach a spiritual state, which is reason. And once you reach spiritual state, then you're free of everything, including God. And another question he tries to answer throughout is, what is God? Not who is God, but what is God? And he fights against this. And he finally, although it doesn't come out in this play as much as in later works in the Odyssey, God for him is nothingness. And if you can get rid of the body and reach a spiritual state, at the end of that you will see that you have come to nothingness, and then you have complete freedom, which is a Nietzschean idea. When he was in school, he wrote a dissertation, a PhD dissertation on Nietzsche. And that was a philosophy that always stayed with him. One of his famous quotes that I quoted last time and this time is, we come from an abyss, we end up in an abyss, and in between we call it life. That's what he's basically saying. So he's trying to bring this out. This was written in 1922, and he decided to write a play on Odysseus after having read a German playwright, Gerhard Hauptmann, who wrote a famous play in 1914 called The Bow of Ulysses, who did pretty much the same thing as he's doing in this play. That play was in 5 acts, it's a much bigger, but the whole idea is the kind of things I'm saying here. He was taken by this play, and he decided to write his own and dedicate it to Hauptmann. He wrote it, he never dedicated it to Hauptmann. He thought he would, but some reason he didn't. All of these things are in his letters. He left copious letters to his first wife. He was married twice. And as he was doing these things, he would write to his wife, who was never with him. Neither wife was with him. He was married twice, but had very little to do with either of them. And he never stayed in Greece. He was born in Crete. He left for Germany. He traveled all around the world. He's written many travel books of almost every country you can think of. He has a book on Israel, on Portugal, on Spain, on Greece, on Russia, on Japan, and there's some that I'm leaving out.
Israel doesn't exist.
He has one called something about Israel.
It should exist.
Maybe he
It
did. He started writing the travel books and the novels in 1957.
Oh, okay.
He started out as a poet in 1922. This is one of the first. From this kind of verse tragedy, he went then to pure poetry. In 1938, he wrote The Odyssey, a modern sequel, which is a huge 800-page poem. And then, in order to survive and make money, he started to write novels. Zorba the Greek, The Last Temptation of Christ, The Greek Passion, and he thought those were just exercises for him. His main interest was in the poetry, especially the Odyssey, which followed him throughout his life. He died in Germany. He was born in Crete, and he never really went back because he was also someone that wanted to kind of look over the Greek language. He thought there were a lot of things wrong. For example, he hated double consonants. So Odysseus, which is spelled Odysseus, his play is Odysseus, Odysseus. He hated the accents. The Greek has 5 accents: a grave, acute, a circumflex, rough breathing. The other one is called, I don't know, smooth breathing or something. He did away with all. He thought the only one you need is the one where you have to stress the syllable. So he kept one. Well, that did not endear him to the linguists. So he was never appreciated. And the Odyssey he wrote, he used, first of all, these things that he did with the language, but he also used Cretan dialect. And Greece has many dialects, and if you're from one place, you can't really understand very well people from another. I had that problem myself. The first time I went to Athens, nobody really understood what I wanted to say because my dialect was Samian, and the taxi driver would say, "Do you know where you are now?" in front of the door, and I would say, "Ba." He says, "You still don't know? There's a woman waiting for you there." I said, "Ba." Well, evidently, ba in Athens means no, but in my dialect it means yes. So that was one example. So Kazantzakis had that. He really did not come into his own as a major world writer till he was translated into English by Kim and Fryer. That was 1958. So from 1922 to 1958, neither Greek nor anyone else really knew much about him. So that's the background. So when we start with the first part here, you notice that even in the settings, he tries to make things contemporary. He says we're in front of the Ithacan Sore, adjoining the sea, and Aphrodite's chapel is there. He doesn't say temple, and that's important. He uses the word chapel. So he's associating Aphrodite as a goddess, just like a contemporary saint. And most of the major churches in Greece are built over temples of Artemis or Aphrodite, especially the Virgin Mary's temple. One of the largest churches in Athens is built on top of the temple of Artemis. Artemis was the goddess who was the most guarded of her virginity. So that's why the Virgin Mary is usually built on top of the temples of Artemis. There were 3 virgin goddesses. Athena was a second, but Artemis was the most guarded of her virginity. If anyone ever saw her bathing or naked, they would turn into a bear or they would be turned into something else. The famous myth of Callisto, which happens to be the North Star today, because Zeus put her up there as the North Star. Ursa Minor. Anyway, so that's important to look at how things are always changed to show that it's a contemporary story. It starts out with a group of maids, which is not the case in Kazantzakis, in Homer again. Here we have, I think, about 6 maids. Melantho, who is the very bad maid in the Odyssey. She's the one that tells on Penelope's weaving trick. She's the one that has affairs with the suitors, and she doesn't want to see Odysseus return. And then he makes up some names. Vigla, Chloe, Gorgo, Eriphale, Leucothea, all those are made up names of maids who are milling around, carrying water, and talking about the possible return of Odysseus, because the story opens 20 years after Odysseus' absence, and the following day is supposed to be the anniversary of those 20 years. So even though they all believe that he'll never return, it's been too long, in the back of their minds they're thinking of the prophecy that says that Odysseus will return in the 20th year. And so they're discussing among themselves. They're upset because all these maids are young girls. They might not even really remember the original Odysseus. But among them, there is an older woman maid, Vigla, V-I-G-L-A, who is actually spying for the suitors. But they don't know that. Well, they have an idea that she's doing it. And they're arguing with her, saying, why are you talking about Odysseus coming back? He's dead, he's not gonna come, we don't want him. They're having fun, being free in the palace, making love to the suitors. And it's interesting the way they talk about these things. Well, we're not gonna read all this, but right at the beginning on the second place, this Vigla says, Floozies, what's your hurry? You annoy the entire seashore with your moaning, which keeps me sleepless all night long. They're lovemaking. And another of the maids says, just because your wilted body and your once firm but now sagging breasts can't find a man to harvest your dried up bosom, you enjoyed your youth lying atop goat-footed Pan's woolly, frizzy hair belly, as the caves about reverberated with your wild, erotic screams. Now we're the ones ripe for picking. It's our turn to frolic with men. So you see the argument, and it's all sensuality. It's all brings to mind Aphrodite, who is pushing for this kind of thing in order to take over from Athena, who is reason, and that's why Athena's temple fire is out. Aphrodite is in control. Sensuality is in control. And that's what's going as the play opens. Odysseus should appear now in the 20th year. In Homer, at the beginning, Odysseus appears and he meets Athena in disguise. And she turns him into a beggar, and she makes sure that his wealth is in a safe place in a cave, and then she tells him to go to his swineherd's hut. He is the most honest of the 3 shepherds. There are 3 shepherds in the Odyssey. One is a swineherd, that's Eumaeus. One is a goat herd, that's Philotios. He's also a good one. And one is the goat herd is not he's the cow herd. He is after the cows. The goat herd, Melanthios, is the bad one. He's on the side of the suitors. And these shepherds, their job is to provide meat for the suitors, which of course is exhausting Odysseus' wealth. Everything has to do with wealth. So that's how that opens. And Odysseus goes to Eumaeus, where he stays there for books 13, 14, 15, 16, till his son comes and meets him. And then in book 17, 18, 19, the beggar goes to the palace to size up the suitors in disguise. And then in 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, he gets rid of the suitors and puts his house in order, and the epic ends. Not so here. Everything changes. The recognition changes, which is significant. Why are recognitions different? That means at what point does Telemachus recognize his father? In the Odyssey, the father is recognized in book 16 in Eumaeus' hut. At the beginning of the Odyssey, Telemachus the son is away. He has gone to overseas, not overseas, in other parts of Greece to find out if his father might return or might be dead. And he tries to go to those warriors who fought with him in Troy and did return alive. 2 of them did return. Menelaus, the husband of Helen, and Nestor, the wise king of another section. They came back safe and sound. So Telemachus thinks that by going to these people and asking questions, they can tell him something about his father. He goes to Nestor first. Nestor says, I haven't heard a thing, but you should visit Menelaus, who recently came back from Troy. He had problems getting back too. It took him 7 years to get back. It took Odysseus the 10 years to come back. But he's back, and he should know something probably. So Telemachus goes to Menelaus. There he meets Helen for the first time. And they host him, they're very nice to him, they tell him what they know about him, and they do know a few things about him. And it's time, he's been away a month, and it's time to come back. So when Odysseus comes to Ithaca, Athena says, now you go to Eumaeus' hut, and I will go retrieve your son and tell him it's time to come home. And since the son is also being sought after by the suitors, Athena says, don't go to your palace because they'll be waiting for you to kill you. Go straight to Eumaeus' hut. She has in mind she's going to get the father and son together so they will meet and they can strategize together. So that's where they meet. And at some point during that meeting, when Eumaeus goes out to feed his pigs, Athena all of a sudden changes Odysseus back to his original form. Telemachus is surprised. He thinks a god has metamorphosed before him. And he says, I'm your father. And finally convinces the son to recognize him. And together then they strategize what they're going to do to get rid of the 109 suitors. That doesn't happen in this play. In this play, you'll notice Odysseus keeps from telling his son who he is because you say, if you're not old enough to realize the son in the father, to realize whose son you are, my telling you isn't going to do anything. And at some point in the play, the son says, I've had enough of this nonsense. I'm going home and I'm going to take care of the suitors. And it's at that point that Odysseus says, son, because he finally sees that his son has reached the age where he recognizes his responsibilities and doesn't need actually to know who the father is. So it changes that way throughout. That happens in the second part, where reason comes about. In the first part, we just have Odysseus talking with the maids who don't want him around, the young ones. The older ones do. There are 2 older maids, Euryclea, who used to be the woman that brought up Odysseus as a baby, and Eurynome, who was the maid that was there from the beginning. And Eurynome is actually Athena in disguise. So at the moment that the maids leave the scene, she shows herself to Odysseus, and he recognizes her, and along with reason then, eventually they'll take care of what's coming. So that's pretty much the way thing is. In Homer, Book 13, the emphasis is always on family and putting things in order. So when Odysseus leaves for Ithaca, it's always hospitality, prayer, and family. That's what they emphasize throughout. Okay, so let me go through here. Ask questions if you've read it, and if, as I'm going, because we can't look at everything.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. No, I'm just surprised that, having read the play, okay. So I'm waiting for a revelation of his identity, of Odysseus' identity, and instead I'm getting a test
Yeah.
of Telemachus's knowledge, understanding, manhood, etc. So is that what Kazantzakis is after? Focusing on the next generation and the readiness, because that's a form of war, more or less.
Yeah, I think in part one, Odysseus is always sarcastic and ironic. He's playing with them. He's letting them know at every second of the way, I am Odysseus, but in a way where they can't take it as truth. He's saying, I'm Odysseus. And then he says, Eumaeus asks him, who are you? Are you really Odysseus? He says, no, I'm Daedalus. And he gives this long story about Daedalus. But he says, I saw Odysseus. And then he gives another story. If you count the number of lies in the play, there are about a dozen, 12 in the short play. Or in Kazantzakis, in Homer's Odyssey, there are the lies, but they're a different kind of lie, and that's important too. For Homer, a lie is the use of the mind, because you're now using the culture at the time that Homer is speaking, and the setting of the Odyssey is that you're dealing with monsters, semi-gods, and gods. You cannot use weapons against these creatures or whatever. They won't work. So what can you do? You have to use your mind. That's why Athena favors Odysseus. She only favors people that are like her, wisdom. She represents wisdom. So in modern terms, if we're saying Athena favors Odysseus, we're actually saying wisdom favors Odysseus. He's a smart guy. He's intelligent. And his intelligence comes out by the way he gets from under the situations he allows himself to get into. So when he meets the Cyclops, he knows he can't kill him. The sword won't do anything against a 60-foot giant. So he decides, what can I do? So he tricks him by telling him lies, by giving him undiluted wine. In Homeric times, the thing was that the wine had to be diluted with, I think it's 6 measures of water to 1 measure of wine, because it was very powerful. And when Odysseus comes to the cave of the Cyclops, he has bags of wine that he thought before going, I better be prepared for something unusual, that he was given as a present by a previous adventure. And so he tells the Cyclops, before you eat us, let me give you something that's Greek, some wine. And he drinks it and he likes it. He says, more. That's what Odysseus wants to hear. So he gets him drunk. And before that, he's giving him a lie of who he is. He makes up a story. So when he's asleep, drunk, he has his crew, the 12 men with him, take a stake, put it in the fire, and put out the giant's single eye. So now he can't see him. But they can't get out of the cave because there's a boulder that's so heavy that only the Cyclops can move. So what he decides then, using his mind, is to tie his companions that haven't been eaten. Half of them were eaten already, so he's left with 6. He has them tied under the belly of the sheep that the Cyclops has in his cave. And when the cave is open to let him out, the giant sits at the entrance touching his sheep, but he doesn't touch underneath where the companions are. And Odysseus himself just takes hold of the largest ram, the biggest one, and holds on to its wool under his belly, and he gets out free. So you see, it's constantly, the emphasis is on mind. And you see that in every case, with Circe, with Calypso, with the other giants, the Lastrygonians, with the Lotus Eaters. All those adventures have to do with what is he going to do to get out from that particular situation. So a lie for Homer is equated to the mind. But once you come to present time, or you come after Homer, let's say the 6th century, during the tragedies, where you're dealing with other human beings, that trickery is translated as negative. It's a lie. Because you're dealing with people then, all people. You've done away with monsters and all. But early on, lies are the mind. And so Kazantzakis, being in present time, has many lies, but he's being ironic, he's being sarcastic. He's showing that Odysseus has reached a much higher plateau in reasoning, in intelligence than the others, that he can fool anyone he wants. He says at one point, I can be a god if I want, or I act like a god. And as a matter of fact, in order to reach the level he wants to reach, he has to defeat God, the idea of God. He has to put him aside. Otherwise, he's never free. Freedom is to shed yourself of all of these ideas that keep you from being completely open yourself. There's at the very end, when he died and he was being buried, the words that he uttered was, I don't remember now, it's on my t-shirt too. There are 3 things, like, I fear no one, I believe in no one, I am free. Those are the 3 things that he said. And of course the Orthodox Church excommunicated him because he said that, and they refused to bury him. And the story goes that some shepherd from Crete came to the main city of Heraklion and lifted his body himself and placed it in the grave. So he didn't want anything to do with religion or anything else. Although he started out, the play that he wrote immediately following Odysseus is Christ, which was a few years later, because he saw Christ as a rebel who was trying to do the same kind of thing in a different way. So, well, getting back to the play. So we have Vigla then arguing against all these maids. On page 55 she says, "Heaven protect me, deliver me from these blockheads who jeer at me. But my cries fall on deaf ears. You laugh now, you floozies, but not one of you will escape when he's on the island. I know the cunning rogue he is. He's patient, evasive, and suddenly at the right moment, when you least expect it, he's on top of you. Then, Let earth part and swallow me, and you're free from care. Merciless will be the slaughter on your heads. If you run away, he'll still catch you, and lynch one after another in the courtyard. Your delicate little hands won't even have time to touch his knees in supplication. And there are all kinds of little things that he gets from Homer that if you haven't read Homer, it doesn't make as much sense when it says touching your knees in supplication. In Homer, the greeting of someone who might be a god, because you don't know when you come across a stranger whether it's a god or a person. What you have to do is put your left hand behind a person's knees and your right hand under the chin. That's the supplication, that's the greeting. The idea there is, if it's a god, a male god, they usually have a beard. You give it a little yank, because if Zeus bows, it's yes, and he cannot deny you that. So if you say, will you help me get home? Oh, yes, he has to do it. The problem is, Odysseus meets young women like Nausicaa. So when he comes to that adventure, he's thinking, again the mind, what if she happens to be a human being and I touch her knees and I'm naked? She's going to think rape. So that's a very famous passage in Book 6 of the Odyssey, where he has to consider, how do I approach this person now? He's been traveling for 10 years. He hasn't seen a human being for all that time. He comes across this beautiful girl, which could be a naiad, semi-goddess, a human being, and she's standing firm. Everybody has run away, but she stands before him. So he thinks she could be a goddess, but I can't approach her as a goddess because she could be a human being. And it's a whole passage that goes through that you listen to his mind, trying to decide what to do. So finally he says, I think I'm going to have to use language. Now, what would a young girl want to hear more than anything else? And he begins, I hope that whoever marries you is this and that. Marriage is important. I hope that your mother and father love you for your beauty. If you are a god, pardon me for not touching you, but I'm mesmerized by your beauty. I can't move to touch you. You know, all kinds of lies that he comes up with. But it works, because by the end of the passage, this 16-year-old girl wants to marry him. And that's what happens throughout. So,
Can I interrupt?
but
you?
not, yes,
It seems like his lies are to get what he wants,
always.
always.
Yeah.
And he manufactures them, but
Yeah.
he realizes what the possible outcomes of
That's
a
right.
certain situation would be.
And that's why what you just said is important, because I mentioned this last time, in books 9 to 12 in the Odyssey are the adventures that he tells to the king. The king asked him, who are you? So he tells him, and that's how we know about the Cyclops. But it's the first time that Homer is using direct speech. Everything that is being said is through Odysseus' mouth, whereas the other part of the story, Homer narrates. So if we know Odysseus is a liar, that he uses lies, as you say, to get what he wants, why isn't he lying to this king who he expects to send him home? And not only send him home, remember, he's lost all of his wealth at this point. And by the end of his stay at Phaeacia, the kingdom of Elchinus, the name of the king, he is given 3 times as much wealth as he would have had he not lost what he won in Troy over a 10-year period. And all they did during those 10 years is raid villages, take slaves, accumulate wealth. So when the war is over, they can show something for themselves. He lost all of that. But Elchinus gives him 3 times that. Why? Well, he convinces him. So why isn't the Cyclops a lie or an embellishment? Doesn't have to be a complete lie, but he makes himself out as the hero. I did this, I did all. I took my companions and set them free from the lotus eaters. So he does embellish. And that's what makes the Odyssey interesting, because you have this direct speech. And you have to consider this. Who is the character saying this, and would this character say it in this way? But you don't have it here. Here, Kazantzakis emphasizes, as I said, irony most of the time, and the lies he tells also are interesting. When he says, I am Daedalus, which doesn't happen in Homer. Why Daedalus? Well, Daedalus in myth is the man who designed the labyrinth. And he's also the man who created the wings that his son put on, flew too high, the sun melted them, and he fell to earth. So it's escape. He's the architect of escape. He designed the means of escaping. That's why he's Daedalus. Daedalus was also an inventor. And so there's a reason for selecting the lies he selects in here, which are different from the lies Homer uses, that Homer selects, because it tells something about the character as each of these writers see that character, as they want to see him. So once Bigla just said what I read on page 55, Melantho, the bad maid, the young maid, says, I pray to you, Mistress Aphrodite of the unbridled sea, deny his homecoming, grasp both father and son by their feet, and smash their heads upon the rocks. Melantho is having an affair with Eurymachus. She's young, they're free now. Maids are the possession of Odysseus at this time. They're slaves. And this is the first time these girls are completely free. That's why when Odysseus returns in the Odyssey, he asks the older maid that he knows well, who has been faithful. And Euryclea says, every of the 50 maids, only 10 were not faithful, she says. And those are the 10 that Odysseus says, kill them. But Telemachus, the son, once he's given the responsibility, says, no, that's not good enough. I'm going to hang him. And they hang him. That's what the feminists disagree with, like, what's her name?
Atwood.
The Canadian, right, Atwood, that wrote up
Margaret
and also the U of P professor, Emily Wilson, who translated the Odyssey. But at this time, they are possessions. And they went against their duties, and that's why here, these girls, there's another one called Lefkothea, sisters, keep quiet, don't shout. She's making her way through the olive grove. She's referring to Penelope. Now they're talking among themselves, complaining about Odysseus, who might come because the prophecy says so, although nobody believes it. And all of a sudden, Penelope appears. And what's Penelope doing? Our anxious queen has reached the shore holding a basket of palms for the sea-born goddess. She wants to appease Aphrodite, and she's bringing something to the temple. In this case, she's bringing palms, and she's bringing white pigeons for your altar again, lady love, lest you complain. But you, lady, in rage, pound on her bedposts, hungry for a man to satisfy your passion. So it's Aphrodite that's pushing all this. But it's interesting here also, because when Penelope tells us about her dream, it's in her voice that we hear her dream. She says Aphrodite visits me each evening. She complains. She wants me to make up my mind. Well, is Aphrodite visit her every evening, or is it her desire that she's expressing? And again, you have this dichotomy here by putting the words in her mouth. Aphrodite told me at night, such and such. And that confuses the situation. When Penelope does come on the scene on page 57, for the first time, this is the first time we hear her, she says, "Mistress of the beguiling smile, with hands clasped upon your ample holy bosom, you appeared in my dreams last night and frightened me, lady. Your sacred eyebrows moved waveringly, tossing my bed sheets aside, and your cry made my bed quiver. You sleep," now this is a quotation that Penelope is saying Aphrodite said to her. So Aphrodite is speaking through her. "You sleep alone and scorn the alluring gifts of Aphrodite that soothe even the beasts of burden. Rise, you're destined to quickly welcome to your bed a virile male body of your choice, and together take pleasure in my all-consuming lust that veils the earth, and like newlyweds seek my blessing." And Penelope responds in her dream, "Lady," I screamed, "I fear your anger, and at night from deep within me secret voices emerge to cloud my reason, which till now like a guiding light channeled my words and actions. I sense your hands on me, and your command takes hold and controls my mind and being. What freedom can I enjoy in God's fathomless design but to minister to you? You draw near with your scheming smile, sweetly assail my body and declare." And again she quotes Aphrodite, who says to her, "Through my voice, fate dictates that you remove Odysseus's heavy bow, that indomitable weapon inactive upon the column, and the suitors whose strength instantly bends that formidable weapon and casts an arrow through 12 axe heads, willing or not, you will be his wife." That's interesting because in Homer, he makes sure that this particular passage comes in book 19, where Penelope at some point says, "This beggar that's been hanging around the palace seems to know things. He seems to be smart. I'd like an audience with him." Now, she never had an audience with a beggar before, we're told, because there are many beggars that have come to her claiming they've seen her husband. And she's tired of feeding them and getting all these lies. But for some reason, she thinks this guy seems to be different. So she asks for an audience. And Odysseus calls back or tells the messenger, "Tell her that it's not a good idea for me to see her in the open day. I'll see her at night." Well, who is a beggar to tell the queen when he should see her? So that makes an impression. And he does come at night, and they sit together, and then book 19, most of it, about 200 lines, is the interview. And Penelope begins by saying to him, "Please tell me who you are and where you're from." Well, you never ask that question of a stranger. That's not hospitality. You feed them, you take care of them, and if they want to tell you who they are, they will. But you never ask questions. So he says, "My lady, I'd rather not say this." She insists. And not only she insists, she goes on to say, "Tell me what he was wearing if you saw my husband." Because the beggar says, "I saw your husband 20 years ago when he was first going to Troy. He came by Crete. He always, in his lies in Homer, makes himself somebody from Crete because it's the longest distance from Ithaca. his home, figuring that they can't catch him on the lie. Who would know somebody from Crete, which is across the world as far as they were concerned. So he's always from the farthest point from where he was brought up. And she says, well, do you remember anything? After he answers, how can anybody remember what somebody was wearing 20 years ago when I just met him for a few days? And then he begins precisely telling her what he was wearing. The color of the cloth, the thing, even a brooch that he had on his neck, which had on it a picture of a dog chasing a deer. That precise. So how could a stranger remember 20 years ago? And you figure these are signs. He's saying to her, look, who else would remember it but your own husband? If you're clever enough, you'll know who I am. But she's never alone, even though she's interviewing, and we're told that many times. There are always two maids accompanying her, so they can't give themselves away. So it's by the end of that conversation that Penelope says, you know, I think I'm going to call for a contest of your bow. And whoever bends it and shoots an arrow through 12 X heads, I'm going to select that person as my husband. And the beggar says, do it, lady, don't delay. So we take it that they're giving signs to each other, because later on, in book 21 or 22, when Telemachus says, how can you be so cold, mother, and not approach this beggar who is my father? And she says, in due time, we have signs between us. So there we have evidence of that. Because at the very end, she puts him through another trick. She says, going to the bedroom and move the bed outside. Well, the bed can't be moved because it's a stump of a tree, and they build a bedroom around the tree. And since she's had nobody else in her bedroom, she knows that if he says, I can't do it, a bed is immovable, he's the only one that would know that. But then people say, well, why does she do that when she already knew him in book 19? But the idea is she does this because she wants to know not whether he's Odysseus, she knows he is, but is he the Odysseus that has come back to her, the Odysseus that she knew when he left? How has the war changed him? Is he the same man? Does he have the same feelings? That's the new scholarship now. That's how we can say there's early recognition on Penelope's part. But not here, you see. Here, we put the emphasis on the goddess Aphrodite. Because this extends to Kazantzakis' philosophy, which says that we're constantly fighting between the Apollonian and the Dionysian theory, whatever you want to call it. Our Apollonian is Apollo, who is the god of the sun, the god of reason, who is also Athena, reason. Dionysus is the Roman Bacchus, the god of wine, the god of irrationality, the god who gets drunk and becomes irrational. So it's always Apollonian versus Dionysian, reason versus irrationality. And actually most of Greek literature, especially the tragedies, are about just that. The Apollonian versus the Dionysian. When you don't have something in between and you lose the Apollonian reason, you have disaster. That's when all the bad things happen. If there's reason to go along with this, then things can be fine. So you either go one way or the other. And that's what you have here. You have part one, the Aphrodite, the Dionysian, the senses, sensuality, irrationality, versus wisdom, Athena, the Apollonian. And that becomes the theory that Nietzsche comes up with. He uses exactly those terms. He wrote a work called The Birth of Tragedy, where he talks about these two terms, the Apollonian versus the Dionysian. And that's what Kazantzakis is following here. So up to this point, and throughout this first part, that's what we're talking about. So when Penelope is saying all these things about Aphrodite, who orders her to do this, she turns to Euryclea, the maid, the old maid, says, "And you, good Euryclea, when evening comes, remove the wall-mounted bow from the colossal column and deliver it this very evening to the old swineherd to newly string with vigilant patience, rub it down with oil. The goddess howls, and fearful I obey." It's an order. I have no alternative but to listen what the god says. You cannot fight gods. So Aphrodite decides the bow, which puts the emphasis again on what I'm saying, Apollonian versus Dionysian. And then they go on from there. Euryclea, who in Homer is the woman who washes Odysseus' feet and recognizes the scar he received as a young child during a boar hunt, and that identifies him. So, in Homer, Penelope is present, but she's facing the fire. She's got her back on Odysseus, the beggar. The two maids in waiting are sitting beside her. She's always seen in the presence of maids. Euryclea has a basin of water, and she's behind Penelope, ready to wash Odysseus' feet. That's another thing that Penelope says to Odysseus before this happens. She says, you should take a bath, put on fresh clothes, and then we'll talk again. He says, I don't want anybody touching me unless you have an old maid. Well, he knows damn well she would know him. So he's asking for it. And she says, yes, we do have an old maid that used to take care of Odysseus as a child. So they call Euryclea. She brings the water. She takes his feet, puts them in the water. She sees the scar. She tries to scream out. He grabs her, says, don't give me away. She drops the pail, and before it hits the ground, you have a whole story of how he got the scar. And at the end of the scar, you hear the bang of the pan that has fallen on the ground. Now, did Penelope hear that bang? She's sitting right there. She doesn't turn at all. She's looking straight at the fire because the two maids are sitting beside her. So that show, again, she knows, but they don't want to give anything away. And so there are all kinds of signs like that. Here, nothing happens in this play about that, but Euryclea is here. But you can see that she is on the side of Odysseus. She says on page 59, she's talking to Penelope. She says, my child, 1,000 ills befall the mortal soul when it ages, but the gods instinctively mollify the years. And when the mind begins to falter, they endow us with a mantic vision to augur the future and the past. We become wiser as we get older. And now on death's doorstep, that she feels she is, by divine right I can see clearly. And with these I prophesy before I die. And she gives her view. Queen, in my heart I see his foam-drenched prow swiftly cleave the sea and come within sight. He'll come, don't be hasty, my child. Hour by hour I count the time. The 20 years have not yet passed. A single day, the most momentous, still remains. God's promised pledge cannot be cracked, for gods are immortal, and patience is a stately gift. She's telling her, just be patient. don't listen to Aphrodite. Actually, you're not listening to Aphrodite. You're listening to your voice. You're listening to what you want to do. Penelope says, the 20 years are gone, good woman, and he sojourns only in our minds. My son, flailed by waves, is at risk in search of his world-renowned father. I sense it in my heart, direct from immortal, godly mouths, which never lie. Odysseus is dead. Euryclea, he only died in your heart, my lady. So here you begin to see that Penelope is anxious finally to find somebody, and she has good support here with Aphrodite. Because when she prays later to Aphrodite, she says, I have a favor to ask of you at the very end. And she says, put in a good word for me so that when I have to select, let Eurymachus win the contest. She wants that particular suitor to win. So that's another idea there about that. So that's what's happening at the beginning. And then all of a sudden, Vigla, the one who is a spy and the maid that's with the suitors, comes in. Well, it's actually Eurynome comes in, who first says, we're lost. And Vigla says, oh, did he come? Now they think, Odysseus, that the prophecy is coming true. And everybody says, oh, what a disaster. Blessed Aphrodite, deliver us. But he hasn't come. It's another signal that we get now. Eurynome, the other old maid, comes in to tell us that on the left, as I approached the palace, when something happens on the left, is bad in Greek mythology. If it happens on the right, it's good. So if a bird happens to fly on your right, it's a positive sign. If it flies on your left, it's a bad sign. On the left, as I approached the palace, I saw a great eagle. The eagle is associated with Zeus. Spread colossal beating wing, shrieking, and dropping like death upon our courtyard. Alarmed, the pigeons soared with sorrowful cries, their shadows darkening the sky. The thing here is Zeus is speaking, the pigeons take flight, who are the suitors. This is irony here, which tells us that Odysseus is coming to take care of things, and Zeus is going to send the bridegroom. He is going to let us know now who the bridegroom is going to be for Penelope, who of course is going to be Odysseus. That's why this sign. Melantho, the bad maid, says, receive warmly this confirming sign and raise your hands in gratitude. Inform me, Zeus, who is the lucky one to whom you send your radiant raptor from on high, the swift messenger of matrimony? Kudos to you, predestined groom, whose soft caresses will make Penelope's withered frame flower. Like pigeons, the suitors take flight. Who is the groom the eagle plucked? Who did Zeus name? And at that moment, the beggar appears, and he says, Odysseus! But he's a beggar. So he's revealing himself, but nobody's going to take him at his word because he's a beggar. He says, hey, bitches, where am I? Wait. All the maids run away the moment they see this old beggar who is very feisty. The maid's tight-lipped, and only Eurynome remains. Eurynome remains because she's Athena in disguise. So they talk to each other. He doesn't know where he is because after 20 years, 10 years of adventures, he just thinks he's at another adventure. And Athena has brought a mist over the land, so he doesn't know where he is. And he's telling us, his first words out of his mouth is, you try my patience, you fiends, and whatever logical thoughts remain, I misplace. You confound my mind with illusions and nurture my heart's hunger with flights of fancy. Once again the sirens spring before me on my journey, poised erect, chanting in the wind, and their voracious voices balance my soul between a yes and a no. The yes and a no is, how should he act? Should he act or not? Where is he? Is he someplace where it's friendly, or is he merely at another adventure? And he says, rise, Odysseus, bend your agile mind like a bow, and rend the mist. Do I reason like a mortal? In my breast I embraced a god as I cast about. Yet I battled the Stygian waves, and clinging to the waterlogged tiller, I conquered death again. Lightning bolts blind me, and my godlike mind blurs. Athena, Athena, I shout, release me. Prevent the gods, my lady, from using me as fodder for carrion crows. Burst from my head fully armed. Recall the many years we strove together. You bunker down on my brow as I lay in the sun. Descend upon the earth and tend my haughty heart, lest it burst. So he's at his wit's end. Athena has not been with him during the adventures, because in the Odyssey she can't be, because there Poseidon, the god of the sea, is against Odysseus, and Poseidon is her uncle, since she's Zeus's daughter, and Poseidon is Zeus's brother. So it's the sea against Odysseus, and she has to stay out of that till Poseidon gets through with Odysseus, and then she can come back. And that's why she's waiting for him in Ithaca. Now she can take him up again. She hasn't gone against her uncle. We get nothing of that here, but Kazantzakis assumes we know all this, because you've read the Odyssey.
Of course.
So it's at this point that Eurynome, in the book, page 64, you notice now she becomes Athena. And she says, old-timer, why are you shouting? Why yank your hair like an offended widow? On your feet. Haven't you learned after so many years to govern terror? And yet you're not timid. You stand on your own 2 feet with soul and body well suited to each other. Brace yourself. It's time to cast your willpower like a spear on fate's scale, and it will tip your way. And this line is important. Since a mortal's heart holds the reins. It's not the gods that tell you what to do. It's in your heart. It's in you. You hold the reins, not God. Man holds the reins, and that's important here. That's a Kazantzakian idea. And then Odysseus says, your words land on my heart like good aged wine, etc., etc. But he says he doesn't know where he is. He wants to be told. And again, the way he greets her, he says, I seek not pity, but respect for a man's sea-drenched mind. Lay hands on me and set a castaway free from both earth and sea. However, if you're the offspring of mortals, blessed is your father and mother, and thrice blessed the man who will share your nuptial bed. Those are the very words that Odysseus says to Nausicaa in the Odyssey, trying to convince her that he's a good person, and he's not touching her because he doesn't know whether she's a maiden or a god. So Odysseus says the same thing to this woman, Eurynome, who is actually Athena. And Athena says, your tongue rebounds, stranger, as it weaves its praise and manipulates the subtle, embroidering timely ornaments on its cloth. But first reveal your lawful name and the consul that adjudged you to the waves. And he lies. I'm a merchant from Phoenicia called Much Enduring. And then he gives his lie, his story. And that's an important word in both Kazantzakis and the Odyssey, the word endure. Very important. as a matter of fact, I think that the main theme of the Odyssey, or one of them, and I'm not the only one that thinks this, is in, I think it's book 18, 15, 16, 18, these lines from 130 to 135, where Homer says, of all creatures that breathe and walk on the earth, there is nothing more helpless than man is. Of all that the earth fosters, for he thinks that he will never suffer misfortune in future days, while the gods grant him courage, and his knees have spring in them. But when the blessed gods bring sad days upon him, against his will, he must suffer it with enduring spirit. And you have that, I think, maybe 45 to 50 times, the word enduring. You must endure whatever fate has in store for you. And that's what's being said here. I'm called much enduring. And then he goes on for a page and a half to give us who he was. And this is where he claims that he too followed the census and was part of all that. He says at one point, I sailed swift ship, I sailed the azure seas of Greece, dealing in fancy fragrances, multi-breasted goddesses, coarse demons, and translucent magnets, and even spiders. On crouching slave women such trinkets came across as a sky full of stars, which even Athena would proclaim, whose hands dare vie my immortal ones? Wondrous relics I sold to women, holy poisonous herbs that confer double youth to those late in life, and cryptic pleasures to dames and old maids, to beguile passers-by while seated on their stoops. Also mysterious trifles, secret makeup, curly-haired phalluses, and magic mirrors. I sold everything a woman needs, my lady, to ensnare her man. And every evening, Mother Astarte is another name for Aphrodite in Egyptian mythology. So every evening, Mother Astarte's blessings were upon us night and day, that earthen form replete with weighty breasts that resuscitate life. I worshipped her, prostrate on the seashore, hoping to bring profit to my trade. O young maidens, to repose on an evening upon the warm Phoenician sands at Astarte's vermilion feet during our erotic drunken festivals. One could sweetly coo sighs like a turtle dove, and embraced shout, never again will I return to Greece. He's taken up with sensuality, with Aphrodite. And Athena says, what sweetness trickles from your lips? Like a honeybee sensing an exquisite flower, my soul remains sleepless at your words. She likes that he's this way. He's clever, he's intelligent. She likes the lies. And then he wants to know, where am I? Can you tell me? Pity an old man and make known to me on whose land again the gods have set me, he says. And she does. She dissipates the mist. He recognizes her, which happens in Homer in Book 13. And on 68, he says, Athena. She says, don't be frightened. And then he complains, which is also, he says, you finally got here. Where were you all these 10 years when I needed you? And it goes on this way. Once he sees the land he's at, he can't believe it. He says, this is, my mind takes flight, this barren island, this narrow wasteland, devoid of water and light, utterly beguiles and restrains me. How can my decrepit soul fit within a sparrow's nest? This Ithaca seems too small for me. She tells him, don't beat your head against the rocks, but open wide your eyes with gratitude. Look, I dissipate the mist. There lies your native mountain. And she explains the various signs he should know. And then he believes it, O land of my fathers, etc. And then she tells him, now you have to go straight to Eumaeus. He's the only one you can really trust. And there you can wait for your son, who I'm going to go now to Menelaus in Sparta and tell him it's time to come home. And that's what he does. So I'm skipping here. Then she tells him, and this is important.
What page you on?
Pardon?
What page you on?
I'm on 71. At the very bottom, Athena says, take note that troublemakers celebrate your life, merrymaking to the melody of the lyre, which resonates in your halls throughout the day. Odysseus, and which of the gods dares allow it? Athena, Aphrodite. Odysseus, once again she reaches out her soft hands to drown me. Be aware that of all great immortals, I fear none as much, because she fears what man desires most, and it's the hardest thing to do, to put the demands of the body aside in order to reach the level that you must. He has trouble doing that himself. And Athena says, rejoicing the maids ravaged my altar and extinguished its flame from your courtyard. And like a whipped dog in heat, I whimper with faithful Argos at the entrance. But on her altar, a reeking smell ascends slowly to nourish her immoral body. It's interesting here too, with a reference to Argos. Argos is the dog that Odysseus had as a puppy when he left. Now, of course, he's 20 years old. He's been waiting on a heap of dung because he's not being taken care of, a symbol of the chaos in Ithaca and what has become. That's what the dog represents. And when he sees Odysseus in Homer, he wags his tail, stands up, and expires. And Odysseus sheds a tear by turning away so nobody will see him. In contrast, in Kazantzakis, we don't see this happen, but a maid, the bad one, comes and says, you don't know about this old beggar. The dog jumped up to greet him, and he caught him by the throat and strangled him. So that's the kind of person he is. Well, in here, he strangles the dog because he doesn't want to be given away. There's nothing sentimental. He has a mission to accomplish, and that's what's foremost in his mind, and he does it. But the interesting thing on 73, which comes out again, is this yes and no. He says at the bottom from 72, top of 73, don't fret, goddess, for I mean to bury all these freeloaders, and like sacrificial bulls decapitate them before your altar, and snuff out their bawdy songs to silence their harsh sounding lyre. Yet a snake still coils around my soul. Reply, Athena, flash before my eyes what I want to ask, but I cannot say. What should I do? And Athena says 2 options are attainable, yes or no. Again, this yes or no. Odysseus says, your words are few, but to the point, goddess. Yes or no. That is, act or don't act. Act means get rid of the suitors, kill them. So he understands there. Then he says, and my son, and now they go into the son. Athena says about Telemachus at the bottom of 73, he comes of age and no longer wants to remain in his father's shadow. Oh, am I done? I am. I guess we stop at page 73, and I'll try to finish the rest of it next time, which is impossible.